In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. That's 800-696-1030. 800-696-1030.
Joe had huge problems with the IRS.
I knew it was coming. I hadn't filed taxes since 1990.
All the IRS letters coming in added up to a nightmare.
To get up to like $68,000, my heart started beating fast. It's like, there's no way, man. I mean, I ain't going to be able to do this.
Then they stopped his paycheck.
So that's when I started making phone calls and found U.S. Tax Shield.
U.S. Tax Shield went to work immediately.
They just took the bull by the horns. What blew my mind is he called the IRS right then and there.
So why is U.S. Tax Shield A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau? Joe knows.
They saved me a ridiculous amount of money.
If you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS or state, choose the company Joe chose, U.S. Tax Shield.
It was the best decision I made. U.S. Tax Shield is the way to go. Life is good. Thank you, Lord.
Call 800-471-3287.
U.S. Tax Shield. Boo-rah. Yes.
800-471-3287. 800-471-3287.
We will keep this promise to the American people. If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period. If you like your health care plan, you will be able to keep your health care plan, period.
This is the most transparent administration in history. Not even a smidgen of corruption.
Fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. What difference at this point does it make?
If you got a business, you didn't build that.
Welcome to the face. Welcome to the face of the new democracy. Don't expect us to admit a mistake. We're paying off election debts to those who will take. Attorney General's lying even while
it's time to hear the truth about America's biggest challenges. You're listening to America Off the Rails with your host, Rick Robinson.
Well, happy Thursday evening, folks. This is Rick Robinson. You are listening to America Off the Rails, and it is just a few minutes past the hour of 6 p.m. Central. We have a great show. The first half of the show will be with my good friend Jared Day, host of Red Nation Rising Radio, and we also have a guest on the line with us. Jared, why don't you go ahead and take a second to introduce the guest and then give him a second to tell folks what he's all about.
Yeah, we have Eric Carr joining us tonight. He's a Army vet, and he writes. He just started a show. He'll probably tell you all about that. He contributes some great articles. He cross posts them over to my website, and he's a great American. We wanted to get him on here to talk about his show and what he's been up to. So, Eric, how are you doing tonight?
Yeah. Doing great, man. How are you?
Excellent. So you've had
let me just say, first of all,
that's all right. Go ahead, Eric.
Sorry. Well, I just want to say, first of all, I really appreciate the opportunity, you guys to let me be a guest on the show. That's huge. That's awesome, and I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing as well.
Yeah, and So you started your show around Memorial Day, was it? When you started on your YouTube channel?
Yeah. Well, I started blogging a while ago, and then I launched the Car Show YouTube channel. Car with 2 R's. I know it's clever. I started that on Memorial Day, and it was just, I thought, a really nice send off. Not like the 4th of July that rah patriotic, but which is nothing wrong with that. But I thought it was an appropriate holiday to have the inaugural episode.
Well, I got to say, I do some writing, and I'm a big fan of your writing. You're an excellent writer, and you have some great insight. Sometimes you pull out angles on issues that people that aren't in the forefront always. So I always look forward to your articles, and I appreciate you cross-posting them over at Rebooting Liberty. So, I was just looking at your header on your blog. Rage against the dying of the light. Do not go gentle is a call to action. It is an understanding that while we may occasionally suffer, we must not submit quietly and meekly. Rage because freedom, more than anything else, is vital to our very existence. It's the conviction that to die on our feet than to live on our knees. Cast off the chains of intellectual oppression and think about it. Now, that's pretty awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm actually posting a new article this evening on thecarshow.com, which is the website that I started up a little while ago. So I just want to invite everybody to go over there and check out the new article and the videos that I posted up previously. My sort of one thing, my primary purpose is to get people to think, because I think that's what's really keeping people divided for, red and blue, left and right. I think the only real major difference is that people get so stuck in one ideology or dogma or another, and they just stop really thinking about things.
Absolutely. And it seems almost in the last 6 to 8 years, it's gotten even more divisive, and people have clung to their ideologies even more. Not clung to them, but they've kind of got into an echo chamber, and it's a real roadblock to getting anything done. And with the GOP split between establishment and some genuine people that really want to restore a constitutional republic, they want to, enforce our laws, whatever, on the border. They want there to be 3 co-equal branches of government instead, so there is such a divide that sometimes we get stuck in echo chambers, whatever ideology we have. When you say, Rick?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I completely agree. That's actually one of the founding principles behind our entire station. We actually have libertarians, full-on conservatives, conservatarians, as JD and Stacy like to call themselves, and we also have actual liberals. Actually, one of the hosts on the show is a teenage liberal who is honestly the most dichotomic person I think I've ever met. He is an American-loving socialist who likes guns. It's really confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how that would be confusing.
But yeah, first of all, Eric, I wanted to say, take just a moment to say thank you very much for coming on. Now, our original intention was to actually have you on for the entire show. However, I was actually contacted at the very last minute by Governor Sununu's office, who wanted to do an interview, and Thursday was the only time that he could pencil it in for 3 weeks. So at some point, if you are willing, I'd like to actually have you back on for a little bit more time, just so the folks get a little bit more time to get to know you, because I normally try to offer guests at least the whole show if they're interested, but with that coming up, I really couldn't turn them down. I'm just saying.
No, I understand. Yeah, I mean, I kind of resent the implication that I'm less important than a governor. That's just my own thing. But yeah, no, I'm kidding. Absolutely. Anytime in the future, I'd be more than happy to be a guest again on your show. Fantastic.
So one of the things I like to ask folks that are, I'm kind of getting the impression that this is something that's at least somewhat new for you. I know you've probably done the writing for a while, but the show thing seems like, at least from what I've been able to glean from it, it seems like it's a fairly new concept for you. So what got you involved in this? Because I have to admit, it's interesting for me to compare stories because it all seems like we all kind of came about it pretty much for the same general reason. So I just always like to try to compare notes.
Yeah. It's a long story. Not really. I was actually watching a Bill Whittle video the other day, and he was talking about the Founding Fathers. And he brought up something that is terribly obvious, but I had never really considered it before. And that is the fact that the Founding Fathers, the men who laid the foundation of the entire country and the government, weren't politicians. They were businessmen and scholars and, inventors. And they just were the guys who were in the right place at the right time and thought, it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. And I think that sort of applies to people like Bill Whittle and people like you guys, and I would hope myself as well, where I think the people in America especially have been so free for so long that we take it for granted now. We just take for granted that freedom and prosperity and comfort are the natural state of mankind throughout the world, and that's not the case. So I guess my mission is to get people to open their eyes and realize that what we have is precious and it needs to be fought for and needs to be protected. And I just want to get as many avenues of getting the message out as I possibly can, writing and videos and things like this. Really.
I completely
agree. Well, you're off to a heck of a start. You're reaching a lot of people already.
Thank you. Well, and I appreciate the help.
Well, we've all got to work together, especially for a difference. No, I was just going to say we've all got to work together, especially if we're honestly trying to make a difference. That's one of the things that I don't think a lot of folks realize. If you're spending all your time immersed in whichever dogma that you are focusing on, you don't realize that if you really remove the idiots from DC, in DC from the equation, we have a lot more in common with each other than we do those idiots. And it's about time that people remember that. And that's actually been the focal point of this show from the day that it started. I don't care if you're right of center. I don't care if you're left of center. I don't care if you're center. As long as you're at least not one of the really, really far out type folks, we've got a lot more in common with each other than we do those idiots. And nobody remembers that anymore because they want to focus on fighting over the 5 or 6 things that we disagree on instead of counting on the other hand, the other 7, 10, 15, 20 things, if you throw your toes in there, that we do agree on. And it just doesn't make any sense anymore to me to fight over the stupid things that we don't agree on when there are so many things that we do.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I think a lot of times we get so tied up in disagreeing that we lose sight of the middle ground. And if I could interject a personal element, I actually recently started dating this woman who's a liberal, and she's amazing. She's an amazing woman. And one of the great things is that we don't avoid political topics. We actually talk about them quite a lot. And we found a lot that we agree on and things that we disagree on, but we're both equally open-minded enough that we're willing to accept the other person's point of view and actually realize when they bring up something we hadn't previously considered. It gives me hope, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's like I said, I have lots of friends that are liberals. I mean, I have some folks that I consider friends that are like completely off the reservation liberals, and we disagree more often than we agree, but they're still my friends, and we still talk about it, and we don't. I mean, I've not been knocked out by one of them yet, and I haven't felt the urge to punch them, so I think we're okay.
Yeah.
But before we get too much further, I do want to take a second just to give a shout-out to the affiliates real quick, because with all the issues at the beginning of the show, I kind of forgot to do that. So I want to give a quick shout-out to Red State Radio. You guys will be listening to this show Sunday morning at 6 Eastern, so at 5 Central. High Point Radio out of New Jersey. You guys will have this show later this evening. I'm not sure when they're going to start running it yet, but this is one of the first ones we'll be sending over there. And then, of course, we have iHeartRadio, Stitcher, FM Player. Pretty much, if you don't know where to find me, it's mainly because you're not looking. The other thing I did want to do is give a shout out to a quick sponsor, because we're only going to be taking one break today because we're doing back-to-back interviews. So I want to give a quick shout out to concealandcarry.net. if you happen to be in the market for looking to get your concealed carry permit or maybe anything to do with your weaponry, I highly recommend that website. If you happen to be a dealer or someone who offers those type of services, I highly recommend that website as well. Feel free to go check it out. It's pretty easy to find. It's the word concealed, the letter N, then carry, and .net. They have locations where they have listings in all 50 states. So pretty much no matter where you are, if you're looking for something to do with any type of weaponry, equipment, or classes, they can help you find them. So make sure you go check that out. All right, so that gives us up until about a minute before the hour, or before the bottom of the hour, to go ahead and just finish rounding everything out and talk for a bit, because I'm not going to go to break till right before the bottom of the hour so we can make room for the governor coming in. So got all the important stuff out of the way, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So, it's interesting that you mentioned that you have a liberal girlfriend. If you don't mind my asking, what have been some of the things that you guys have been talking about lately? And where have you agreed or disagreed? Whichever one was more fun.
Well, she was very upfront. She adores Obama. She fully intends to vote for Hillary in 2016. And I was upfront with her about, I'm fully behind Rand Paul, and we both sort of mutually, twitched. But we agree on things like, like the logical aspects. We agree that the truth more often than not can be found in the middle of a topic than on one extreme or another, like you were saying. And pretty much everyone in America who's in their right mind agrees that the government needs to be more fiscally responsible.
Yeah, the thing about that's a true statement. Pretty much everybody in the everybody in the country thinks the government needs to be more fiscally conservative. But we have different definitions of how we should get there. And I think where the conservatives miss the argument is they're focusing on the small things like the food stamp programs, instead of focusing on the fact that we're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars on a fighter jet that China's already hacked the plans to.
Right.
Or that can't dogfight.
That too.
You can't do anything. Yeah, it's meant to do everything and can't do anything.
There's an interesting thing they always bring up about jack of all trades. I've only met one person who can actually pull that off, and in this instance, it seems like that's the same concept they had for this fighter jet, and it's just not going to be able to pull it off because they wanted it to be able to do everything. And the more things that you try to make something do, the less likely it is to be able to do any of them. And it's just, I don't know. To me, that's just one place where we could have put the money to much better.
Well, yeah, it makes no sense. It's completely a politician's line of thinking to do something like decommission the A-10. If something works, and it works that exceptionally well on the battlefield, why would you mess with it? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. To me, that just makes perfect sense. So to a politician, no, you've always got to meddle.
Well, it's because they've got to justify the pork expenditures that they're getting for their districts. And they only get those by making sure that there are certain contracts that get approved.
And how much do they get kickback from the manufacturing companies for getting the contracts? It's all about money is so woven into it that there's no human element to it anymore. It's just like, it's sick. I don't know. Yeah. Some people that I talk to believe that the only way to rein in the federal government with the spending is not a convention of state, but use Article 5, not to have the type of convention they had in, 1789 or 1791, where they had a runaway convention. Use it just to address the one issue of spending, not some radical thing where they could completely alter the foundation of our government. And I think it's really interesting, and I don't see any other solutions right in front of us. I'm not saying that's the solution, but where's the solution? Nothing's changing, and it's just getting worse. There's no push in the right direction.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's definitely going to take something drastic, because even among the people who agree that, yeah, we're spending too much and spending on the wrong things. I mean, everybody wants to cut back spending as long as their interests are still being funded. And everyone has different pet projects. So it will take, I agree, something drastic like that.
Well, I mean, here's my question, and like you said, everybody agrees that we're spending too much money. But here's my question, because so far it seems like we continue to prove Einstein's definition of insanity, because we keep doing the same things election-wise and expecting different results. We give one side power for a while. They promise us they're going to make things better if we give them a shot, so we give them a shot. Eventually, and it seems like eventually it's happening a lot more fast or more quickly the last couple of times, but eventually they basically just start doing the same things the other side was doing. The only thing that's really gotten any different is where the money's going. And the last two election cycles are pretty good examples of that. So it just seems to me that I don't know if we could do something as simple as a convention of states to rein in spending, when the simple fact of the matter is we can't seem to get people that do the things that we tell them they need to do when they're there. It's like we've either allowed them to, or they have just really realized that they don't have to work for us anymore and they can be in D.C. and do whatever they want. One of the ways that I think we honestly would be able to fix it, along with, Jared, your idea of fixing the spending issue by using the Convention of States idea to make constitutional amendments for balanced budgets, everything else. I think we should get it back to the point of how it was before, when Congress only spent a couple of weeks a year in D.C. and the rest of the time they were home dealing with their districts. They're in that bubble now so many times and for so often they've lost touch with the people that they're supposed to be serving, because it's the same thing that we were just talking about with the ideologues. If all you do is hang around the same people that believe the same things you do, eventually your behavior becomes altered to match theirs. And D.C. is a case in point.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. John Stuart Mill wrote that anyone who knows only their own side of the argument knows little of that. And that's one of the problems that you see. I recently did a video called American Aristocracy, and there was an article along with it that talked about that very thing, about career politicians being in D.C. so long, they completely lose perspective and they completely lose touch with the people they're supposed to be representing. And all they end up representing is their own interests.
And we keep seeing that same thing over and over and over again. Much like one of the things that honestly terrified me, and I think I finally figured out why he did it, was during the whole TPP flap that was finally brought to everybody's attention over the last few months, even though it's been something that's been going on for years. And I have to admit, even with as much as I keep up, I didn't know how bad it was until it got close to crunch time. And then I started really digging into it and listening to interviews that were happening on the station. And I was like, I didn't know half of this was in there. Oh my God, this is terrible. Well, it came to my attention that Ted Cruz had voted initially for TPP. But once he actually got a look at the rest of the documentation, because apparently to tell people that you were going to vote for it to even be able to be allowed to see what was in it, at least that's been my understanding. He got a look at the TISA documents and everything else that went with it, and all of a sudden he's like, oh no, this is a terrible idea. So, it just amazes me how many people go into D.C. claiming to have the best of intentions, and within a few months to a couple of years, they've been chewed up and spit out by the machine, and they're basically just cookie cutters of the people they said they were going to replace.
Yeah, power corrupts. Yeah. They get in there and they just become corrupted. They lose themselves, because when they come out of local or state government, or maybe a governor, they're really all about their constituents. And I've watched a few politicians go through that metamorphosis into a creature of K Street, from a Constitution-abiding, liberty-loving patriot, that came out of the private sector to serve in the state legislature. It's terrible.
You are right about that, sir. All right. Well, at this point, we are actually just about out of time, guys. Eric, why don't you go ahead and tell folks where they can find you again?
Call from unknown caller. To add this caller to your current call, press 5. To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
Why is it not showing me the dial.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
That must be the other one. Hang on a second, guys. Bear with me for a second. I can't find him now. Great. I'm going to have to call him back on the break, I think, because now I've lost him. All right. Sorry about that, guys. I actually tried to have that set up to where he was going to be calling in while we're in commercial. We are actually about to have to take the break. Eric, real quick, why don't you tell folks where they can find you again?
Yeah, I appreciate that. The www.thecarshow.com.
All right. And Jared, you've got a big show coming up here in about a half an hour. Why don't you give folks a little bit of a heads up with that, and then I'll be on there with you shortly.
Yeah, we have the primary challenger to John Boehner, J.D. Winteregg. I'm hoping, and God willing, we'll get grassroots, all across the country to convince the 8th District in Ohio to pull their head out of their ass.
Call
do the
from
right thing.
unknown caller. To add this caller to your current call, press 5. To accept, press 1.
I do believe we might actually have Governor Sununu with us on the line now as well, if I'm not mistaken.
John Sununu calling in.
All right, sir. We're actually about to go to break. I just wanted to make sure you actually got through this time because I couldn't bring you in a moment ago. We're going to go to break. At this point, Jared, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go so you can get ready for your show. Eric, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will have John Sununu, the former chief of staff of the Bush White House during the good Lord, the George Bush administration, the Bush 41, also current author of The Quiet Man. And sorry, for some reason, you don't get paid to talk for a living, and every once in a while I can't seem to pull it off. You guys have a great night.
Thanks,
Jared, I'll
Rick.
be with you in a minute.
Red Nation Rising brings you Town Hall Radio.
From a single tweet to 3 million a month, our community is a force to be reckoned with on social media.
So don't miss our show, Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern on K98 Talk.
Our chat room is our co-host, and you ask the question.
Join us and be heard.
So get ready to sound off on Red Nation Rising Radio. No one else is going to do it for you.
There's a wild, wild whisper blowing in the wind, calling out my name like a long lost friend.
In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. That's 800-696-1030. 800-696-1030.
K98Talk.com, a leader in Internet radio. So grab your seatbelts and take the ride of your life on K98Talk.com.
We will never fully understand what we've asked of our military service members, of their families or their children, asking them to deploy, patrol, stay on watch, on point, asking them to put themselves in harm's way, to endure it all. But we do understand that it's our turn, our duty, to bring them all the way home, to keep them secure, to have their backs for the rest of their lives. Wounded Warrior Project long-term support programs do whatever it takes to help our most severely ill or injured veterans live independently, at no cost, for life, so that they might stand at ease. Find out how you can help at findwwp.org.
This is JD.
And this is Stacy.
Join us Tuesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, for Game On. Remember,
lock up the children and the old folks.
Game On, the home of libertative conservatism.
Where no one is safe, no one is spared, not even the hosts.
Oh, that was supposed to be a spin cycle. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. We love you anyway. Right round, baby.
Self-monitoring
right round.
Ebola
Anyway.
radio strikes again.
Anyway.
Anybody see the host monkey? Where's the host monkey? Where's the host monkey? For God's sake, I need an antidote. Just do your rant. Let's pop out of the segment.
Find us on Twitter at JD and Stacy.
You're listening to K98Talk.com.
Phone calls, we got a pen and telephone to bypass all your laws. Political correctness will replace the Bill of Rights. Support religious freedom, bless you, pray to Jesus Christ. The press is in our pockets.
All right, folks, we're back. We're live. This is America Off the Rails. I'm your host, Rick Robinson, and right now I am joined by a very special guest, Mr. John Sununu, former Chief of Staff for the George Herbert Walker Bush administration, Bush 41, also former governor and the author of The Quiet Man. Wanted to make sure I got the introduction down for you this time now that I'm not trying to do 14 things at once. Good afternoon, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm fine.
It is an honor to have you here, sir. So like I told you during the break, I think I want to spend at least as much of this segment as I can giving you a chance to talk about what inspired you to write the book, some of your favorite moments from the book, just give us a general overview. I don't want you to give away too much because we want folks to go buy it. Speaking of which, the link to the book will be in the podcast episode that publishes here later as well. For anybody
thank
that's
you
interested.
very much. Well, I wrote The Quiet Man, which is about the presidency of the first President Bush, to put between the two covers of a book what I thought were his extremely significant accomplishments, many of which people don't really recognize how significant those achievements were, and to put into one place, if you will, a record of the facts of what happened almost a quarter of a century ago that made a huge difference in terms of stabilizing the world at that time and improving things in America as well as around the world. And I wanted to give this president the credit he deserves, get this president the credit he deserves, because he frankly was much too modest a man to brag about it for himself. And I thought after 25 years, it was time that somebody did some bragging for him.
All right. So, yeah, sorry about that. I had a technical issue on our side. Got that cleared up. Do apologize. Yeah, so basically what you're saying is the book, basically you wanted, just to summarize, what you wanted to do was give people the perspective of Bush 41, the first President Bush that you had, because
right.
I agree with you. I mean, I have to admit, I'm younger. I grew up in the Reagan era. I was in second grade. I watched Reagan get shot on TV in second grade. It's actually one of the most embedded memories that I have. But I was just starting to understand what politics was really as a fledgling adult during the Bush administration. And I think, in some ways, he's gotten a pretty bad rap, to be honest. And I kind of get the impression from the book, I have to admit I have not had a chance to read it yet, but I do plan on it. I kind of get the impression just from the few interviews that I've heard and the little bit that you just said there, that what you're trying to do is basically give folks the perspective of the man that you actually knew instead of how he was portrayed.
Right. Look, everyone recognizes that George Bush came into office after Ronald Reagan sort of set the table. Reagan had rebuilt America's defense capacity. The Soviet Union saw that they couldn't keep up, and there were indications that Gorbachev recognized this and wanted to somehow perhaps bring the Soviet Union into better interactions with the rest of the world. And Bush saw this and used, frankly, the leverage that comes with peace through strength, with the strength that Reagan had put in place. Reagan had built this up, and Bush used this to create the results that were available with the great diplomacy that Bush was able to bring to the game. For example, he first of all had to unify our NATO partners, Margaret Thatcher, Helmut Kohl, Francois Mitterrand. Each one had a slightly different agenda, and you can't deal with the Soviet Union with a divided agenda amongst the Allies. And Bush worked hard on each one of them individually to create a common agenda, and they agreed that they would make this a significant initiative of suggesting a major reduction of U.S. forces in Europe, troops and armor, if the Soviet Union would make an equivalent reduction. And that offer was put on the table, and Gorbachev essentially accepted it and began withdrawing the troops that were occupying the countries in Eastern Europe, the Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania. And in essence, George made the wager, and Gorbachev accepted the opportunity to do that, and it opened the process up for free elections there. And as we know, what eventually happened, we ended up with what George Bush called a Europe whole and free. The Czechs were freed, the Poles were freed, they had elections, they had democratically elected governments. Even in East Europe, Eastern Germany, which was sort of seen as the place that the Soviets would give up last, Gorbachev allowed the relaxation which led to the collapse of the Berlin Wall. And on that amazing day, we were in the Oval Office. The press, the news came through the press. We held a small news conference. And I think one of the amazing demonstrations of presidential discipline is that George Bush knew that if he over-gloated, if he over-crowed about the fact that the Berlin Wall had come down, that the hardliners in the Soviet Union could take advantage of this and perhaps either get rid of Gorbachev entirely or tie his hands from doing any more. And Bush had the discipline to certainly express great satisfaction at the freeing of Eastern Europe, the final symbol coming down, but he did it in such a way that he didn't embarrass Gorbachev. Other folks also know about the other great foreign policy achievement of George Bush. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, Bush made a very simple statement: this aggression shall not stand. And he said that if Saddam Hussein did not leave Kuwait, we would use force and get him out. And the art form, the artistry of the presidency that Bush demonstrated was putting together a coalition that included not only Arab nations going to battle against another Arab nation, but it included the former foe of at the superpower level, the Soviet Union themselves became part of that coalition. And in a very patient way, the president built up our resources, and then in about 5 days of combat, expelled Saddam from Kuwait. And then Bush did something very controversial. He chose not to follow Saddam into Baghdad. And at the time he was criticized, but now with hindsight, I think everybody recognizes that it was an extremely smart move not to do that. Otherwise, he would have been caught in the quicksand of an occupation. And that's the last thing in the world that the world needed at that time. Those are the two most important foreign policy achievements the president's recognized for. What I try to do in the book is to also point out that he was a great domestic policy president, and that's something most people don't understand. George Bush passed more legislation, more conservative, free market-oriented, individual liberty-oriented legislation than any president since except for Lyndon Johnson and Franklin Roosevelt. And the Bush legislation was founded on free market principles and founded on individual freedom and liberty. It included the very much criticized Budget Pact of 1990, the 5-year pact in which the Democrats, Tom Foley was the Speaker, he controlled the House 260 to 165. George Mitchell was the head of the Democrats in the Senate. They controlled the Senate 55 to 45. They were determined not to let the president have a multi-year budget without some taxes. And Bush looked around and saw the economy faltering. The savings and loan crisis had really created havoc in the real estate side of our economy, and the economy was truly slowing down and unemployment was growing. He had just sent our young men and women to the Middle East. This was in August, September, October of 1990. He had just sent them to get ready to take on Saddam Hussein in Kuwait. And the last thing he could tolerate would be a sequester of the defense funds while those folks were needing the resources to do what had to be done to get Saddam out of Kuwait to protect themselves. And so the president had to accept some taxes in the package. The package he negotiated was one that included an increase in the gas tax, a gas tax that had not been indexed for inflation in almost a decade. And what he got in return for it was extremely important. He got 3.5 times as the size of the tax increase. He got 3 in spending cuts. He got a new set of budgeting rules which put a cap on the growth of spending. It also required that any new programs have their own funding process so that you couldn't just add deficit spending to the package. And what happened after that budget was passed is the economy began growing. We had the great growth years of the early and mid-1990s, and we began to generate surpluses for the first time in decades. And the surpluses that Bill Clinton loves to take credit for are really the result of George Bush taking the political penalty of accepting a piece of legislation that had some taxes in it, but one which was extremely important to creating a dynamic economy and creating surpluses and growth and jobs. On top of that, he passed the Clean Air Bill based on free market principles and flexibility instead of command and control. He vetoed a civil rights bill that was a quota bill and got it rewritten so that it was truly a fair civil rights bill. He proposed and got the Americans with Disabilities Act. He got legislation which deregulated the energy industry, and we're really benefiting from those things. He restructured the farm program so that a great chunk of the old subsidy programs were actually converted into incentives for exports. And over a short period of time, we became the biggest exporting nation in agriculture in the world. And that was a huge contribution to the economy. He passed a crime bill that began to provide the resources to the cities to deal with what at that time had been a growing crime problem. He passed legislation and an executive order on immigration, which gave a focus on immigration to people coming into the country with special talents and converted some of the allocations of immigration slots to people coming in to complete families, so that the immigration program became an efficient program. There are countless other examples of his commitment to good policy, including getting the governors, the 50 governors together, only the third time in history that a president has called a convocation of all the governors, and they focused on trying to recognize how important K through 12 education was, and each one of them went back with a commitment to focus their state resources on K through 12 education. So the point is this was the president that, although he's known for his foreign policy, really had a huge level of success in conservative principles on the domestic side as well.
All right, folks, we're on with former Governor John Sununu, author of The Quiet Man, and he's been basically filling us in on his perspectives when it comes to Bush 41. Now, we are getting to the point where we're about to have to start winding down the show, but before you have to go, I do have some questions, because you brought up some interesting things that are honestly kind of the flip side parallels of some things that are going on today. You mentioned the whole the deal with Russia and the Berlin and the wall coming down and everything else, and how Bush could have basically taken his victory lap and he could have pounded his chest and said, I did this, but he didn't do that because he knew that it might have adverse consequences. Fast forward to today,
right,
and we have a president who's basically taking his victory lap in any way that he can, and then touting down anybody who tries to say, I don't think this is a good idea. It just seems to me we have...
You know, you've touched on a very important point on what's happening today. This agreement with Iran, if the president had stuck to his own criteria that he laid out a few years ago as to what would define a good deal, he might be able to get some support for this. But this is a bad deal, and the Iranians knew that this president was desperate to get his name on an agreement, and they played him for a fool. And for him to be bragging about this deal is really ludicrous. It reminds me, with him, kind of flaunting this deal and saying that it was either this deal or war, it reminds me of Neville Chamberlain coming back and saying, peace is at hand. I think they were both equally naive as to the effect of that. But as you point out, this president wanted to beat on his chest and get some credit.
Yeah, and that's exactly how it comes across. And I mean, it astounds me that someone that could be as intelligent as he has to be could be this naive. I mean, because he's not a stupid person. He's not common sense. I don't think he has much more than a modicum of that, but he's not stupid. And I don't understand how it is that nobody's calling him on the fact that he basically just admitted that he lied all the way through the 2012 run-up, because he said they were nowhere near the capabilities that they have right now. He said that over and over and over again, that their capability for nuclear arms was not our concern.
He misled America on everything. He's misled America on Obamacare. He's misled America on this issue, as you pointed out here. He's misled America on frankly, every major issue he talks about. It's the hallmark of this administration.
So I guess as someone who's actually watched and been a part of the political system and kind of over the years still kind of from the ear of it kind of kept your ear to the ground, or the feel of it kind of kept your ear to the ground, so to speak. What do you think we can do at this point? Because I've kind of gotten the impression now where the majority of the American people just honestly don't care anymore. As long as they've got a TV to watch and they've got food in front of them, those are really the two things that seem to concern them most, and that worries me.
Well, we are at a tipping point in terms of electorate. I do think the key to solving any sort of problems is presidential leadership. I know people talk about gridlock, but there is no solution to gridlock without presidential leadership. Congress cannot organize itself. It needs to be led. The opposition needs to be led, and the party of the president needs to be led. And I think one of the things I try to point out in my book is that Bush achieved all that great, fairly conservative legislation with a Congress that was completely in the hands of the Democrats. So it can be done with a president who knows how to lead and is willing to work on a daily basis to get those results. When we were trying to negotiate a budget agreement, Dan Rostenkowski, who was the Democratic chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, we had him down for about 24 one-on-ones with the president to break log jams on issues. The president has to spend political capital. If we can elect a conservative president who knows how to deal with the legislature, who has understood how to make executive decisions, who is willing to take the political fire for making hard decisions in the best interest of the country, I'm not saying we can reverse everything horrible that's been done in the last 6.5 years in one fell swoop, but given 4 or 8 years of a conservative president, we can get this back to where we were.
And I do completely agree. I think at this point we're going to have to get somebody conservative in the White House. The problem is, anytime we vote for anybody who tells us they're conservative, they get where we put them, and then they wind up doing much the same thing as the folks that came before them, which is becoming my concern at this point.
Let's be fair. Our Republican presidents have produced very conservative results while they were there. They sometimes have had to deal with difficult circumstances. And after 9/11, I recognized that the second Bush, George W. Bush, had to increase the budget dramatically in order to rebuild our national security structures and so on. But for the most part, I think our Republican presidents in the last 50 years have been extremely conservative, considering what they could and couldn't do with the Congresses they had to deal with. Look, any one of our candidates that are running now will be 100 times better than what's in the White House now.
No, I completely agree, and I think you might have misunderstood. I meant as a whole. It seems like when we finally get the pendulum to where we think it's going to start swinging conservative for the entire group of the legislature and everybody else, it seems that they get in there and then things kind of go the same way as before. But you do bring up one last question I kind of want to get to before we do really have to call it, because we've got another show coming on right behind us here in just a couple minutes. You mentioned that any of the folks that are running right now would be better than who we have right in the office currently, and I do wholeheartedly agree with that. Well, except for maybe Krispy Kreme. I'm not sure I could pull the lever for him. But anyway, so do you have a particular front runner of your own at the moment?
I don't, but I do lean towards governors and former governors. I really think we need somebody who's herded the cats of a legislature in the past, who's made executive decisions without being able to hide in the multitudes of a legislature. And so I do think at this time we need somebody that has come out of a state house, out of the governor's office. But there are other candidates as well that if they get the nomination, I'll certainly support. But if you're asking my preferences, it is in most of the governors we have running. I do think that the system and the process will sort things out, and I think we're going to end up with a very good nominee, as long as we all remember that with so many candidates, most of us will not get our first choice. You know, we're all divided amongst so many candidates that most of us are not going to get our first choice, and we have to recognize that's going to happen, and we've got to pull together after there is a nominee.
Yeah, I agree, because I think that was our biggest failing in 2012 is we had too many people that did not want the final pick to be Romney. I voted for him.
Right.
I honestly was a little disappointed with his stances during the debates because I thought there were a couple of very big points that he caught the administration in falsehoods, and his group did not pursue them. And actually, when I reached out to contact his group to find out why they weren't pursuing them, I was basically told in no uncertain terms that they had chosen to take a higher stance when it comes to the debates. And it doesn't make any sense to me because he had him dead to rights twice and he didn't use it. So I don't know if he ever decides to run again, which at this point I don't think he will. I don't think I could support him again, but at this point I pretty much agree with you. We have to get somebody that's conservative in there, and at this point I guess it really doesn't matter who it is, because if we get another Democrat in there, especially the ones we have to choose from now, we're just I don't think there's enough time to save anything anymore. But at this point, we are about out of...
If that happens, we'll all be looking at land
somewhere. But yeah. So anyway, we are actually about out of time. I just want to take a moment again to say thank you very much for appearing with us this evening, sir. It has been my honor. Again, as a reminder, this show will be going out all over the place once it concludes, so there will be a lot more folks that will hear it in the future that weren't even listening to it tonight. And from what I can see here, we've had a pretty big turnout in the chat room, so I know we've got a pretty big live turnout as well, because the numbers are usually pretty different between the number of folks that we have in the chat and the number of folks listening live. So I do want to thank you again for coming on with us this evening.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right,
Thanks for having me.
Just as a
and
reminder,
we'll do it again sometime.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. And anytime you want to come back on, I now officially consider you a friend of the show, so you have a sitting invitation whenever you want. All right.
Great.
So
thank you. Keep up the good work.
One last thing before you go. Remind everybody again the name of the book and where they can find it.
The name of the book is The Quiet Man, The Indispensable Presidency of George H.W. Bush, and you can get it at your local bookstore or Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any way you like ordering books. Everybody's got it.
All right, folks. Well, it's been a pleasure having John Sununu on the show with us tonight. We're going to have to cut things out of here. We've got Red Nation Rising coming up here in just 3 minutes, so I have got to make room for them to come on. Thanks to everybody who's tuned in. And again, if you missed it live, don't forget we've got podcasts going out everywhere. You guys take care. We will be back with you tomorrow. Actually, rerun tomorrow, back live Monday.
Thank you.